It was a quiet evening in a small, peaceful neighborhood, the kind of evening where nothing strange was ever expected to happen. The sky was slowly turning dark as the sun dropped behind the houses, and the soft, warm colors of the evening light began to fade away. The birds that usually sang on the trees had gone silent, and the street outside seemed calm, almost too calm. Mrs. Parker, an elderly woman who lived alone in a small, cozy house at the end of Willow Lane, was sitting in her living room with a cup of tea in her hand. She loved evenings like this, evenings that were quiet and gentle, where the world felt safe. Mrs. Parker was a sweet woman, with white hair tied in a bun and a kind smile that made everyone in the neighborhood comfortable. She lived alone ever since her husband passed away, but she never felt afraid because she believed her neighborhood was harmless. But on this evening, something unusual happened, something that would change the rest of her night completely. Just as she lifted her teacup to take another sip, she heard something she almost never heard on her street. Fast, panicked footsteps, the kind that did not match the calm around. At first, she thought she had imagined it, but the sound grew louder and closer, like someone was running with all their strength. Curious and slightly worried, she placed her tea on the table and slowly stood up. She walked towards the window and moved the curtain just a little, enough for her to look outside. The street looked empty at first, but she could still hear those footsteps now right in front of her house. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear but from concern, thinking someone might be hurt. She went to the door, unlocked it, and opened it just a small bit to peek outside. What she saw froze her for a moment. Standing right on her doorstep was a little girl no older than 7 years old. The girl was shivering as if she had been running for a long time, her small body trembling. Her hair was messy and tangled, her cheeks were wet with tears, and her clothes were slightly dirty as if she had fallen on the ground while trying to escape from something. The girl's wide, frightened eyes looked up at Mrs. Parker, full of fear, confusion, and desperation. Before Mrs. Parker could say a single word, the girl rushed forward and grabbed her hand tightly with both of her tiny hands. Her grip was strong for such a small child, as if she believed that if she let go, something terrible would happen. Her voice was shaking when she spoke, and it was almost a whisper. But Mrs. Parker heard every word clearly. "Please, don't let him find me." The words were soft yet heavy with fear. Mrs. Parker felt her heart jump in her chest as she heard the girl's desperate plea. She looked around quickly, but she did not see anyone else on the street. The air felt different now, no longer peaceful. It felt tense, heavy, and filled with a silent danger that she did not yet understand. She gently knelt down to be at the girl's eye level and spoke in the calmest voice she could manage, trying not to scare her any further. "Sweetheart, what happened? Who are you talking about?" But the girl did not answer her question. She kept looking over her shoulder, staring down the street as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Her breathing was fast, and she looked ready to run again if needed. Mrs. Parker could see the girl's fear was real, deeply real, the kind that only comes when someone has seen something they should never have seen. The elderly woman realized that this child was not simply lost. Something was very wrong. Mrs. Parker opened her door wider and quickly pulled the girl inside, closing the door behind her with more force than she intended. She turned the lock with shaking fingers and then closed the curtains at the window. The girl stayed close to Mrs. Parker, still holding her hand tightly, her body trembling as if she was cold, though the house was warm. "You are safe now," Mrs. Parker said softly, trying to comfort her, but she could tell the girl did not feel safe yet. The girl's eyes moved around the room, checking every corner, as if she expected someone to break in. Mrs. Parker gently guided her toward the couch and helped her sit down. She grabbed a warm blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders, hoping it would help her calm down. The girl hugged the blanket tightly, but her eyes stayed wide and alert. Mrs. Parker sat beside her, still trying to understand what was happening. She asked again in a soft voice, "My dear, can you tell me your name? Where are your parents?" But the girl did not speak for a long moment. Her lips trembled as she tried to find her voice. When she finally spoke, her words were still faint. "I can't tell." "He will hear me," she whispered. Those words sent a small chill through Mrs. Parker. She did not know who he was, but she could see how terrified the girl was. The silence in the room grew heavy. Mrs. Parker could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick sounding louder than usual, as if time had slowed down. Then, without warning, the girl suddenly turned her head toward the window, her eyes wide with panic. She quickly slid off the couch and crawled behind it, hiding. Mrs. Parker's heart started racing. She quickly moved toward the window and slowly pulled the curtain just a little to see outside. At first, she saw nothing but the empty street. But then she noticed the shadows moving slightly near the streetlight, and she felt her breath catch. Something was happening, something she didn't yet understand. She turned back toward the couch where the girl was hiding, and realized this night was only the beginning of something far more frightening than she imagined. Mrs. Parker took a slow breath as she walked back to the couch, trying not to make any sudden movements that might frighten the little girl further. She gently knelt down beside the sofa and spoke softly. "It's all right, dear. No one is here. You are safe inside." The girl did not respond right away. She hugged the blanket close to her chest and kept her knees pulled up, as if trying to make herself small and invisible. Mrs. Parker sat on the floor near her, close enough to offer comfort, but not too close to scare her. She didn't want to rush the child. "My name is Mrs. Parker," she said in a warm voice. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." Slowly the girl lifted her head, her big tearful eyes looking at the elderly woman. After a long moment she whispered, "Emily." "My name is Emily." Mrs. Parker offered a gentle smile, hoping it would help the child feel safe. "That's a beautiful name," she said. "Emily, can you tell me what happened? Where are your parents?" At the mention of her parents, Emily's eyes filled with tears again. She wiped them with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath as if gathering courage to speak. I ran away," she whispered. "I had to. He was coming back." Mrs. Parker felt a chill run through her arms at the way Emily said he. It carried fear, pain, and memories a child should never have. She wanted to hold the girl and protect her, but she knew she needed to understand the situation to help her properly. "Who is he, Emily?" she asked gently, keeping her voice soft. Emily bit her lip and looked toward the door, her body tensing again. She shook her head slowly. "I can't say his name. If I say it, he will find me." Mrs. Parker didn't fully understand, but she could see the terror in the child's eyes, and she knew forcing her to talk would make it worse. So instead, she stood up quietly and went to the kitchen. She moved calmly, not wanting Emily to think she was leaving her. She poured a glass of warm milk and returned, placing it near the sofa. "You don't have to talk right now," she said softly. "Drink this. It will help you feel better." Emily stared at the glass for a moment, then slowly reached out and took it with both hands. She drank very slowly, as if she hadn't had anything warm or comforting in days. After a few sips, her breathing softened, and she looked a little less tense, though fear was still in her eyes. Mrs. Parker sat near her again and asked carefully, "Were you running for a long time?" Emily nodded. "I crawled through a broken window. I got cuts, but I didn't stop running until I was far away." Mrs. Parker's heart broke hearing this. A child running alone in the dark, scared and hurt. It was something she never imagined happening in her quiet neighborhood. She wanted to call someone for help, maybe the police, but she worried that if she did it too soon, Emily might panic again. She needed Emily to trust her first. Outside, the wind blew against the windows, and a small tapping sound made Emily jump. She dropped the glass, milk spilling onto the blanket. "He's here," she cried, shaking. Mrs. Parker quickly held her hand. No, it's just the wind, sweetheart. Just the wind." Emily covered her ears and rocked slightly, whispering, "He always came when it was dark. Always at night. Always when we tried to sleep." Mrs. Parker inhaled slowly. The girl was traumatized, that was clear. Whatever she had gone through was not small. "Emily," Mrs. Parker said softly, "you said you ran from a place. Where were you?" Emily stared at her for a long moment. She seemed to fight with her fear and her need for help. Her small hands trembled. Finally, she whispered, "A basement." The word came out almost like a breath, barely spoken. Mrs. Parker's eyes widened slightly. "A basement? Why would a child and her parents be in a basement?" Before she could ask more, Emily continued with a shaky voice. "Me, Mom, and Dad, we were locked inside. We couldn't leave. He said no family leaves him." Mrs. Parker felt a cold shiver run down her back. "Locked in a basement? A man who keeps families there?" She tried to keep her face calm, but inside fear grew. She didn't want Emily to see her worry because the child needed safety, not more fear. She placed a soft hand on Emily's back. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "You are so brave. You did the right thing by coming here." Emily looked at her with tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much for a child. "Mrs. Parker, what if he finds this house?" she whispered. Mrs. Parker looked toward the door again, making sure the lock was tightly in place. "He will not get in here," she said firmly, trying to sound confident, though she felt a knot in her stomach. "I will protect you." But inside her mind a question repeated itself. What kind of man was capable of locking a family in a basement? And more importantly, what if he was already looking for Emily right now? Mrs. Parker sat still for a moment, trying to process everything Emily had told her, but her mind was filled with worry and confusion. She knew she needed more information to understand the danger, yet she didn't want to push the terrified girl too quickly. She stood up slowly, walked to the window again, and carefully lifted the curtain just an inch to see outside. The street was darker now and strangely quiet, with only a few streetlights glowing dimly. Just then something caught her eye. A black van was moving slowly along the road, almost crawling, as if someone inside was searching for something. The sight made her heart jump. She had never seen that van before in her neighborhood. She let the curtain fall back into place and took a deep breath. She didn't want Emily to see the fear on her face, so she forced a small smile as she returned to her side. Emily was sitting on the sofa again, holding the blanket and watching Mrs. Parker carefully, as if trying to read her expression. "Is he out there?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Parker calmly shook her head even though she wasn't fully sure. "I don't know, dear, but we are inside and safe. No one is coming in." She sat beside her again. "Emily, can you tell me more about how you got here? How did you know where to run?" Emily looked down at her small hands, twisting the blanket nervously between her fingers. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I just ran. I ran through the woods because I heard him talking on the phone. He said he was going out and coming back soon. I pushed the small window and the glass broke. It hurt. But I fit through." She rubbed her wrist and Mrs. Parker noticed a dark mark on it. It looked like a rope burn, thin but deep enough to show pain. Emily followed Mrs. Parker's eyes and quickly covered her wrist with the blanket. "He tied us sometimes, so he wouldn't try to escape," she whispered, trembling. Mrs. Parker felt her heart ache. A rope? On a child? What kind of sick person would do that? She placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder. "No one will tie you again. You're safe here." But just as she said that, a loud noise echoed outside. A car door slammed somewhere near the house. Emily gasped and held onto Mrs. Parker's arm tightly. "He's here," she cried softly. "He always slams doors when he's angry." Mrs. Parker stood up quickly and went to the light switches. She turned off the living room light, then the hallway light, leaving only a small lamp on, which she also turned off after a moment of thought. The house became dim, and shadows stretched across the walls. She didn't want to scare Emily, but she needed to be cautious. She peeked through the window again, her hands shaking slightly. The same black van was now parked a few houses down. A man stood beside it looking around the street. Mrs. Parker could not see his face clearly, but his posture, the way he stood, made her uneasy. Emily watched her from the couch, tears forming again. "Mrs. Parker," she whispered brokenly, "if he takes me back, I'll never get out again, and he will hurt my mom and dad because I ran." Mrs. Parker turned to her, her voice firm, stronger than she felt inside. "Emily, listen to me. I will not let him take you back, not now, not ever." But her mind was racing. She didn't know how long they could just hide. She needed a plan, and she needed to act before the danger came closer. She thought about calling someone, maybe the police, but Emily's fear of being heard stopped her from picking up the phone just yet. Instead, she locked the back door, checked the windows, and pulled all curtains shut. When she returned to the living room, she saw Emily staring at the front door, shaking as if expecting it to burst open at any second. "He can smell fear," Emily whispered. "He says he knows when people are afraid. He likes it when they're scared." Mrs. Parker felt cold inside. What kind of monster was this man that he spoke like that to a child? She sat beside Emily again and wrapped an arm around her. "You are not alone anymore. I am here, and I will not let him hurt you." Emily leaned against her, exhausted from running and fear. Her eyes grew heavy, but she tried to stay awake. "Mrs. Parker, do you think he's looking for me right now?" she murmured. Mrs. Parker swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, Emily, I think he is." Emily closed her eyes tightly, holding onto Mrs. Parker's hand for safety. The house was silent again, but it was no longer a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence filled with tension, the kind that made every small sound feel like a threat. Mrs. Parker knew one thing clearly now. Whatever she had stepped into, it was far more dangerous than she had imagined. And the night was far from over. Mrs. Parker held Emily close for a moment, trying to calm the trembling child, but inside her own heart, fear was spreading. She knew she needed to understand the full truth, no matter how painful it was for Emily to say it. She waited until Emily's breathing slowed a little, then spoke in a gentle voice. "Emily, sweetheart, I know it's hard, but I need to know what happened to you and your family. It will help me protect you." Emily looked up at her with tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much sadness, too much fear. She swallowed and nodded slowly, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Mrs. Parker gave her a small, encouraging smile, then sat quietly, giving Emily time to speak. After a long silence, Emily whispered, "It didn't start bad. He was nice at first." Mrs. Parker listened closely as the girl continued. "We met him at a supermarket. He helped my mom when she dropped the shopping bags. He was friendly, and he told us he helps families who don't have a home. At that time, we were struggling. Dad lost his job and we had no house to stay in. He said he could give us a place to live for free until Dad found work again." Emily paused, her lip shaking. Mom and Dad trusted him. He smiled a lot and spoke so kindly. He said we were safe with him. Mrs. Parker felt anger rising inside her, not at Emily's parents, but at the man who used kindness to trap them. Emily continued, voice cracking. "He took us to a house far away. It looked normal outside. But inside, the door had many locks. He locked it after we went in. He said it was for safety." Emily hugged herself as she spoke, as if the memory still held her prisoner. "He showed us a basement. He said it was just for storage. But that night he pushed us inside and locked the door. Mom screamed. Dad tried to break the door, but he just laughed. He said families never leave him because he's the only one who truly cares." Mrs. Parker gasped softly. "Oh, dear Lord," she whispered without thinking. Emily's hand shook as she continued. "He brought us food once a day. He made Dad work outside all day, while Mom and I stayed in the basement. Sometimes he tied us if we cried or asked to leave. He said crying makes him angry. He said fear makes us listen better." Mrs. Parker felt sick. Her hands had turned cold just listening. The thought of a man doing this to a family made her heart pound with horror. Emily's voice grew softer but more intense. At night, he would stand at the top of the basement stairs and watch us through a small window. He never talked. He just watched, breathing loud, waiting for someone to disobey. Mrs. Parker's breath caught in her throat. She imagined that dark basement, the man watching silently like a predator. "He hurt my dad," Emily whispered with tears rolling down her cheeks again. "One night Dad tried to fight him. He beat Dad with a stick and said if we tried to escape again, he would take me away alone." Mrs. Parker covered her mouth to stop a cry from escaping. The image was unbearable. Emily shook as she continued. "Yesterday, he got a phone call. He went outside to talk. He sounded angry. He shouted at someone and said he was coming back soon. Mom told me to hide behind a shelf. She whispered, 'If you get a chance, run and don't look back.' Then Mom pushed the small basement window until the glass cracked. Dad helped me climb up. They smiled at me, even though they were crying. Mom said, 'We love you, be brave.'" Emily burst into tears. "I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to go alone, but Dad whispered, 'Go, Emily. You must get help.' So I ran. I ran through the trees. I didn't stop running." Mrs. Parker's heart broke completely for the child. Emily clung to her like a lifeline. "Mrs. Parker," Emily whispered, her voice filled with guilt and fear. "He took my parents because they tried to save me. He's angry. And when he's angry, he hurts people. He will hurt them. It's my fault." Mrs. Parker shook her head and hugged Emily tightly. "No, Emily, none of this is your fault. He is the one who is wrong. He is the monster, not you. You are brave. You did the right thing." Emily cried against her shoulder, her small body shaking. Mrs. Parker slowly stroked her hair and whispered comforting words. But inside her mind, Mrs. Parker now knew the full truth. This wasn't just a frightened girl running from a stranger. This was a kidnapping, a crime. A dangerous criminal was loose, and he was looking for Emily right now. And worst of all, Emily's parents were still trapped with him. Mrs. Parker's heart pounded, as she realized something deeply frightening. If the man found Emily here, he might not only take her, he might harm anyone who stood in his way. And now she was part of this. Without wanting to be, she had become the only person standing between a child and a monster. Mrs. Parker held Emily for a long moment, trying to give her strength, but fear was spreading quickly through her own mind. She now understood the kind of evil they were dealing with, and she knew the danger was real and close. She needed to think fast. She gently pulled away and looked into Emily's eyes. "Listen to me. We must stay very quiet. I will keep you safe, but we need to be careful, all right?" Emily nodded weakly, wiping her tears. Mrs. Parker stood up and walked through the house, checking every lock again, touching each one to make sure it was secure. She even placed a small wooden chair under the front door handle just to add extra support. The house felt too silent, the kind of silence that made every small sound feel loud. Emily followed her quietly, afraid to be more than a step away. Suddenly, a loud noise broke the silence, a knock on the front door. Not a gentle knock, but a firm, slow, heavy one, like someone testing the door with purpose. Emily froze, her hands covering her mouth to stop a cry. Mrs. Parker felt her heart jump into her throat. She slowly stepped closer to the door but did not open it. She stayed still, listening. A deep male voice spoke from outside, each word slow and cold. "Good evening. I'm looking for a little girl. Have you seen her? She ran away and her parents are very worried." His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of voice that pretended to be friendly, but had darkness hiding behind it. Mrs. Parker said nothing. She did not move. Emily shook her head desperately, her eyes wide with panic as if the voice alone brought back every painful memory. The man knocked again, harder this time. "Ma'am, I know she came this way. People saw a little girl run toward this street. I just need to take her home." His words sounded polite, but there was something in his tone that made Mrs. Parker's skin crawl. She could feel the danger even without seeing his face. She placed a finger on her lips, signaling Emily not to make a sound. Emily nodded, tears silently falling down her cheeks. After a few seconds of silence, the man's voice changed. The fake politeness faded, replaced by a colder, sharper tone. "I know she's inside." Emily grabbed Mrs. Parker's sweater tightly, her tiny hands trembling uncontrollably. Mrs. Parker wrapped her arm around Emily protectively and slowly guided her toward the kitchen, away from the door. She needed to stay calm, to think, to protect the child. The man tried the door handle. It rattled and Mrs. Parker felt her heart stop for a second. She whispered, "Don't move." The lock held, thankfully. After a moment, the rattling stopped. Heavy footsteps moved away from the door, but Mrs. Parker did not feel relief. She peeked through the side window very carefully, lifting the curtain just enough to see outside. She saw the man walking slowly around her yard, looking at her house from different angles, as if searching for another way in. His head turned left and right, scanning every corner. He walked with confidence, like someone who believed nothing could stop him. She could not see his face clearly in the dark, but she could feel his presence, cold, threatening, calculating. Emily whispered shakily, "He won't go. He never leaves until he gets what he wants." Mrs. Parker closed the curtain fast and stepped back. She knew Emily was right. This man was not giving up. He wasn't knocking to ask. He was hunting. And the house no longer felt safe. Mrs. Parker's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She realized she could not wait any longer. It was time. She needed help. She needed to call someone who could stop this nightmare. With a deep breath, she whispered to Emily, "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound." Emily clung to her as Mrs. Parker unlocked her phone with shaking fingers. She knew what she had to do next. There was no more time for fear. Someone had to come and save them. And Emily's parents. With her voice barely above a whisper, she dialed the emergency number. Her finger hovered for a moment, her heart pounding as she pressed the final button. It was the only choice left. Mrs. Parker pressed the call button and held the phone to her ear with shaking hands, her heart thumping so hard she could hear it in her own head. She spoke in the softest whisper she could manage. "Please, we need help," afraid the man outside would hear even the smallest sound. The 911 operator answered calmly, "Emergency services. What is your situation?" Mrs. Parker swallowed hard and whispered, "A little girl came to my house. She escaped a man who has her parents. He is outside right now, trying to get in. He is dangerous. Please send the police quickly." The operator's voice became more alert. "Ma'am, stay calm. Keep your doors locked. Are you both safe inside right now?" Mrs. Parker nodded, even though the operator could not see her. "For now, but he is looking through the windows. I'm scared he will break in." Emily stood beside her, gripping her arm tightly, her tiny body trembling as she listened. The operator said, "I am sending units to your location. Do not open the door for anyone. Can you stay on the line with me?" Before Mrs. Parker could answer, there was a sudden loud bang on the back door. Emily gasped, and Mrs. Parker nearly dropped the phone. The operator heard the sound and said quickly, "Ma'am, is that him? Stay away from the door." Mrs. Parker whispered, "He's trying the back now." They moved away quietly from the kitchen, stepping as softly as possible. The man's shadow appeared through the curtain on the back door. His silhouette stood still for a moment, then the handle shook violently, harder than before. Emily covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. The operator continued speaking, "Police are 3 minutes away. Stay hidden and stay quiet." 3 minutes felt like forever. Mrs. Parker led Emily toward the hallway, away from all windows, and into a small closet where they would be harder to find. She gently closed the door, leaving only a tiny gap so they would not be in complete darkness. They could still hear sounds from inside the house. The man tried the side windows next, tapping the glass as if testing how easy it would be to break. Each tap sent a jolt of fear through both of them. Emily whispered shakily, "This is what he does, and he walks around and listens. He likes when we hide. He likes the fear." Mrs. Parker held her close and whispered, "Don't listen, sweetheart. Police are coming, just a little longer." They could hear the man's slow footsteps outside the window near the living room. Then, shockingly, his voice spoke again, softer now, but more threatening. "You can't hide her from me. She belongs with me." Emily shook her head fiercely, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Parker's fear turned into anger. She whispered to the operator, "He's talking. He knows she's here." The operator responded quickly, "Stay inside. Officers are seconds away. They are on your street now." And then, like a miracle cutting through the terror, they heard it, distant sirens growing louder. The man outside stopped moving. Silence followed for a few seconds, a terrifying silence where no one breathed. Then footsteps rushed across the yard, running. Mrs. Parker peeked through the small gap in the closet door and heard a car door slam. He was trying to escape. Police car lights flashed through the windows, blue and red colors dancing across the walls. Voices shouted outside, "Stop! Police!" Emily clung to Mrs. Parker, shaking uncontrollably. More shouting. Footsteps. A thud. A struggle. Mrs. Parker didn't move. She didn't speak. She waited until she heard the sound she had been praying for, handcuffs clicking shut. A police officer knocked on the door and called out, "Ma'am, this is the police. It's safe now. You can come out." Mrs. Parker finally let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like forever. She hugged Emily tightly and whispered, "It's over. He's caught. We're safe." But she knew the story wasn't over yet. Emily's parents were still out there, still locked away in that horrible place, and now that the danger had been stopped at her door, the next part of this nightmare had to be faced, the part where they would try to save the rest of Emily's family. Mrs. Parker stepped out of the closet, holding Emily's hand tightly, her legs weak from fear but her heart grateful that they were safe. The police stood inside the living room now, their calm presence making the house feel safe again. Emily, still shaking, looked up at Mrs. Parker with teary eyes full of relief and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." Mrs. Parker knelt and hugged her gently, tears forming in her own eyes. One of the officers approached and spoke softly. "Ma'am, the man has been arrested. He won't hurt anyone now. We also found his car nearby." Emily looked frightened again. "My parents, they're still trapped," she said, her voice breaking. The officer nodded reassuringly. "We know. We're going to find them." Emily gave him a detailed description of the place. An old house far from town with a dark basement and no neighbors around. She described the road, the big broken tree at the turn, and the sign with a missing letter that the man used as a landmark. 2 officers took notes quickly, and within minutes a team was sent to the location. Mrs. Parker held Emily close, comforting her while they waited. Time felt slow again, but this time it was filled with hope, not fear. After what felt like hours but was less than one, a call came through the police radio. The officer listening broke into a relieved smile. "We found them. They're safe." Emily gasped, her hands covering her mouth in disbelief. Tears of joy filled her eyes. "My mom and dad—" "They're okay?" she asked, barely able to speak. The officer nodded. "Yes, they're shaken but safe. They're coming here now to see you." Emily burst into tears, this time from pure relief. When her parents arrived, they ran to her, dropping to their knees and hugging her tightly, crying and whispering how brave she was. It was a powerful emotional moment that made even the officers and Mrs. Parker teary-eyed. Emily's mother hugged Mrs. Parker and said with deep gratitude, "You saved our daughter. We can never repay you." Mrs. Parker shook her head softly and replied, "No. She saved herself. She was brave enough to run. I just opened my door." Emily looked up and said, "But you didn't turn me away. Others didn't help. But you did." Those words touched Mrs. Parker's heart deeply. Later, the police told Mrs. Parker that Emily was not the first child the man had tried to harm. Because Emily escaped and Mrs. Parker called for help, they were able to stop him and rescue others who might have been hurt in the future. Emily and her family visited Mrs. Parker many times after that day. They brought flowers, gifts, and warm smiles. But what meant most to Mrs. Parker was the bond they now shared. Emily would often sit with her and read stories, draw pictures, or help water the plants in her garden. The fear of that night slowly faded away, replaced with something stronger: love, hope, and healing. And every evening when the sun set and the neighborhood grew quiet, Mrs. Parker would look at the door where everything began and remind herself of a powerful message she would never forget. Sometimes one small act of kindness can save a life. And sometimes opening your door can open the way to a miracle.